Hey everyone, welcome to this brief presentation and demo. Regardless of how you found this video or which industry you're in, my name is Dan Kalis. I am a serial entrepreneur, a marketing specialist, and I'm really excited to share something really powerful with you from my 20 plus years of experience in sales, marketing, and professional services. And I titled this the most underrated and untapped form of content marketing for professionals, entrepreneurs, and influencers. I have a special guest with me here named Richard Matthews. I'll introduce him formally in just a few minutes, but just know that he is a brilliant marketer and content creator, and he has something really, really awesome to share with you on what he's been doing for his own businesses and for clients, and that may become you at some point here. If you're an entrepreneur, a business owner, a professional service provider, corporate marketing manager, salesperson, or influencer, I know that covers a lot of different people, but any of those people who study marketing, you study branding, lead generation, or prospecting of any kind, you probably consume some type of content to gain knowledge and inspiration regarding your craft. And there's a good chance that one of those forms of content is podcast, especially since the average podcast listener or viewer is a consumer with considerably above average intelligence, ambition, income, and general success in life and business. And this is also why it's arguably the best form of content for acquiring great customers, subscribers, whatever you would call the people that do business with you or are part of your community. Whether your role is to generate leads for the business, to nurture and close the leads generated by other people, or to advise or coach or consult businesses or consumers on your subject matter expertise, you've certainly at least explored, if not benefited from, some form of content marketing, that was designed to create brand awareness, expose common problems that your products or service solve, or desire that it fulfills, and position you and or your company or your organization as a trusted authority and compel that target market to engage with you in one form or another. People say content is king, and that's true. And it's never been more true than it is in this modern day and age. And this applies just as much to thought leaders of all types of nonprofit organizations as well, especially those that are mission driven. I would say the bottom line is that in this modern day and age, successful brands, professional firms, professional individuals, and organizations must engage in content marketing. It's mandatory now. It's not even really an option. In order to capture attention, attention is very valuable. It's probably the most valuable commodity or currency, if you want to call it, that you could have as a business person or anybody looking to influence anyone. Also to build trust, to develop affinity, and to be viewed as relevant to your target market. The only question is which form of content that you should produce and where you should publish it. And some people, some organizations, they choose all forms and all platforms, and they have the resources to do it. They have the time to do it, and they benefit from it, while some focus on just a select few. But today I want to share with you something really interesting, yet mostly hidden in terms of benefits of what many top business experts and leaders would consider to be the most effective, the most efficient, and most powerful, yet underutilized, untapped form of content marketing in the business world. And I've already alluded to it, no surprise, podcasting. But I want you to look at podcasting through a little bit of a different lens, a little bit more holistically and a little bit more comprehensive. And then we're going to kind of tie this together with Richard, who is sitting here patiently, ready to show you something really, really amazing to see how technology plugs into this, how systems and processes, because everything that you want to do, you can pretty much do anything you want to do. You just can't do everything. And so outsourcing and delegation and having the right people in place to make things happen is super important to preserve your time so that you could spend more time serving your clients, your customers, your members, or your constituents, whatever it is. And this is especially true if you're a professional who provides some type of expertise-based service or any other type of service, whether it's consulting or coaching, various types of brokerage, financial services, health services and products, medical professionals, education and training, and like I mentioned earlier, mission-oriented nonprofits. I'm going to make the bold claim that pretty much any such business person or mission-oriented non-business leader could benefit immensely from having a podcast, but maybe not for the reasons that you previously thought. And here's some benefits of podcasting for business. In the past 5 years, the concept, and this is something that Richard and I were chatting about just previously, and he can even expand upon this when he chats here in a minute. But in the past 5 years, the concept of podcasting has really expanded. It's really grown from just pure audio, like think radio shows, to a full suite of multimedia that incorporates audio, video, still graphics, long form and short form, and everything in between. I would say podcasting is the ultimate platform for demonstrating and expressing your expertise, your passion, and authority in your area of service. And, you could even say to a degree that what we're doing now is a type of podcast. It's a video, but video, again, that can be, sort of splintered off and can be utilized in multiple different forms. You can strip the audio off, and again, we'll talk about that. When you talk about business and marketing, one of the things that I'm really into, unique selling proposition, USP, is so important, because especially if you're in a business or some sort of industry where there's a lot of competition, there's commoditization, how do you separate yourself from everybody else? If you're a real estate agent, there's millions of real estate agents. If you're an insurance agent, if you're even a church leader, there's so much competition and so much noise, so to speak. How do you really stand out if your service itself doesn't really do something truly unique? It's all about you. It has to do with who are you, your personality, your demeanor, your confidence, and your competence. And there's no better way to get that through with podcasting. So attention and trust are the most valuable currencies in the world. And with podcasting, you control the conversation and the relationship with your audience and your guests. And, it might sound kind of weird, but like, you have a one-way communication as you're doing it, so that if you're promoting something, technically, nobody can actually stop you. They can't interrupt you. They can't give you an objection. They have to hear you all the way through, which is a great benefit, of course. So you can get your message out without being interrupted or rejected, which is great. And, there's the topical search volume with podcasting on the platforms like Apple, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, et cetera, are astronomical. If you're just putting stuff out on, say, YouTube or Facebook, you have a limited reach, or even, looking for search volume on Google. Here you have the search volume within those platforms in addition to everything else. And again, something Rich is going to talk about in a minute. And you could reach audiences that you would never reach just through those other channels. Okay, so, I want to talk real quick about 5 different primary categories of the benefits of podcasting, or what sort of things that it can do to serve you, your business, and the people that you serve. Number 1 is the most obvious. It's a content production and distribution machine. Okay, so like, you have this hub and spoke model of content and distribution. You start with recording a podcast, and then it goes out from there into multiple other formats. You can use the transcriptions for show notes, for blog posts, to write a book. Books as a positioning strategy, as an authority strategy, are so vital. And so instead of sitting there and having to type and write a book and getting writer's block, you can take a certain period of time of your podcast episodes, have them transcribed, and then send that to a company that helps put books together. And you might have at least one, if not multiple, books that come from that. So that's a multi-purpose. The short, you can do the short form video and the audio clips and snippets. Have you ever seen, like, one of the biggest podcasters out there, Joe Rogan, has a separate channel that is called Joe Rogan Clips. So while his normal podcasts are long form, several hours, he's got little clips that are, 5, 10, 15 minutes to kind of get people hooked in and engaged. And Gary V, if you follow Gary Vaynerchuk, does the same thing. He calls them Gary V Shorts. You can treat these podcasts themselves as webinars with a really strong call to action at the end, and use multiple of them instead of having one webinar only and sending people there all the time. You can kind of use individual ones based on different topics, based on different target markets. You can distribute, obviously, to multiple social media pages, Facebook groups, through email, video platforms. It helps you build a huge audience, build a following, become an influencer. There's a lead generation component to this. There's an audience building component of this, obviously, to just build a following in general, to be an influencer. When you have an audience, then you have their attention. You're basically the world's your oyster. You're not going to want for anything. If you have people that are willing to follow you and take advantage of different offers that you might have, or become part of your community. Lead generation is obviously really huge, but a lot of podcasters do put out content, but they don't actually treat it as lead generation. They don't put good calls to action. They don't have systems in place to actually capture leads and build email lists and do those sorts of things. And that's really important, something you can do. There's search engine benefits as well, just from being out there and having keywords. People can find you, like I mentioned. There's this binge effect, right? Like Netflix and all these streaming videos. It's like, many of you that are watching or listening to this have probably gone through, and either from an entertainment standpoint or educational standpoint, you find somebody that you like, you find a series that you like, and you just binge one after another after another. And if you can do that, if you can get your listeners to do that, they're going to love you. They're going to have so much affinity toward you. Basically, you're going to be able to bring in you're going to be able to bring them into your fold however you want. And like I said, there's the element of the book. The second thing is, and the rest of these are a little bit shorter, but the second thing is just purely building authority and affinity building. They say the person that's on the stage, so to speak, like the highest closing rate of any sort of sales presentation or persuasion or anything is when somebody's up on a stage selling something or presenting something or giving ideas, or even in a church, in a pulpit. Those people have the command and they have the most persuasion. And so this is a virtual version of doing that. So you're automatically positioned as that authority. It builds your brand, and it's a very intimate and focused format. Number three, this may or may not be important to everybody, but for some people, legacy, right? Just the fact that you're putting your work out there and you're talking about different things that are important to you and you're sharing your influence builds a legacy. It builds a library that you can eventually make available to share with, your kids, your grandkids, or different people within your family. And it's kind of an automated form of creating a journal and journaling your journey. Now, this fourth part is for certain people going to be, in my opinion, one of the best and certainly the lowest hanging fruit, the shortest path to making money through using podcasts, because there's multiple different ways that you can actually make money through podcasting. And we'll get into that shortly after this with kind of some of these myths of podcasting. But if you're somebody who targets specific types of businesses or professionals or individuals for clients or for referral partners, what you can do is when you have a podcast, you are basically a member of the press, in a sort of speak. You're kind of a member of the alternative media, the alternative press. And so if you want to target certain types of business owners, create a podcast where you're interviewing those people, and reaching out to ask somebody if they want to be on your podcast is way different and way better and has a way better response rate than pitching them to take a meeting with you to do a consultation when they know they're being pitched. But if you or somebody on your team reaches out and says, hey, we'd like for you to be on our podcast, the chances of them saying yes is very, very high, probably 10 times more at least than if you were just prospecting them. And so if you're, just as an example, if you're, a business coach or consultant and you want to be able to get referrals from CPAs, who most business owners go to for everything, but they're hard to reach. CPAs are getting pitched by everybody all the time. They don't have a lot of time, but there's not a lot of them that are on podcasts. So if you reach out and you say, hey, would you like to be on my podcast to talk about taxes or talk about cost savings for businesses? A lot of them are going to say yes. And the only reason they're going to say no is if they're just super shy or they just really don't have the time. So that's a way that you can get all sorts of opportunities and appointments, and the time that you spend with them in that 45-minute of an interview, the rapport that you build during that period of time is unmatched. I mean, you couldn't duplicate that in a normal prospecting sense over 3 to 6 months. So it compounds time from that standpoint. And you can lead with true value instead of a pitch. And another thing is that there's a lot of benefit from being on other people's podcasts, regardless of what you're promoting. And so if you're a podcaster and you reach out to another podcast, now you're reaching out as a fellow podcaster. Hey, John. Hey, Sally. Just wanted to reach out. I'm a fellow podcaster and I'm trying to get on some other podcasts. And I was thinking maybe we could be on each other's podcasts. They're going to take you much more serious and consider you a colleague or a cohort. And then you're going to get opportunities there. And then, there's opportunities for additional revenue, where if you have somebody on your podcast, and I've matched up these kind of deals many times in the past. If you have somebody who has something to promote that's relevant to your audience, you bring them on, you let them do their thing, and then you make an offer for them to buy their course or to engage in their service, and you can get revenue sharing, you can get referral fees. So it's another way to make income from that standpoint. And then the fifth category is, I would just say other, and it includes a couple different things. Podcasting provides both short-term and long-term results. It's not like you got to wait until you have 1 million followers and 1 million subscribers to actually get results. Based on what I just said and some other things and some things Rich will talk about, you can get results in the short term. And it's kind of what I call like the triple crown. It's an application of marketing, PR, and sales at the same time. So you're doing marketing because you're putting out the content. It's PR because it's allowing you to get other opportunities where you don't have to pay to get exposure. And from a selling standpoint, it gives you these opportunities and these consultations before you even record together, where you're getting to know them, you're building rapport, and it's just a natural transition to say, hey, would you be interested in help with this? And then lastly, just getting on and recording and doing things, whether you're introverted or extroverted, really helps you improve your speaking and presentation skills, which is just valuable for everything. So it would be like, going to Toastmasters or certain things. And I'm sure Richard can speak to that, is like when you first started doing your first show, you probably sounded a lot different than you sound now that you're very polished, So I just wanted to close out real quick that there's a few myths that I want to just dispel before we get into sort of the details of why Richard, a little bit of his backstory of what he's done with podcasting, why he created the system that he did, and how it can benefit you. But, number one is that the only people that can make money from podcasting are celebrities with millions of listeners and subscribers who can command these huge third-party sponsorship and advertising fees. Well, that's just not true. You want to be your own sponsor and promote your own products and services. And it works very, very well for people that do that. And again, you can be an affiliate, like I mentioned. The second myth, I think, is that you have to be a total extrovert to be a successful podcaster. I don't know what Richard would say about himself. I'm not even that much of an extrovert. I mean, I'm probably a little bit of a blend, but it's, you know, you can be a calm introverted type as long as you're inquisitive. You can ask good questions with your guests and let them be the star of the show. You can be a great podcaster. If you are, you know, sort of very boisterous and you have a great personality and you're a natural presenter, even better. And then, you know, while video podcasting does give you kind of the most material to work with, you can certainly stick with audio if that's what you want to do. A lot of people end up doing that. So that's fine, because you can do long form, short form. It really can work within any of your limitations or your styles or your hesitations, and you can work from there and change your format. Bottom line is that if you're a professional or an entrepreneur and you sell something, you promote something, you can be a great podcaster because you're already interacting with people on a regular basis. And then the last part, and this is a good transition, the last myth I would say is that it takes a prohibitive amount of time and money to have a quality podcast. You know, one recording session per week is pretty easy. And we'll talk about this, especially if your focus is interviewing guests who are your ideal targets, you know, for clients or referral partners, because your goal should be to have as many of those conversations anyway. So you're already talking to people. Doing the technical and creative work yourself would indeed take a lot of time, especially if you don't have technical skills. You're just going to be like floundering. But especially if you don't have a detailed system and process for doing things, but this is easily outsourced, because outsourcing different processes in business is the way to go. And assuming you don't have the time or skills or desire to edit and produce and distribute all your content and everything that goes with that, which is more than you might think, outsourcing this work to a professional production agency, if you want to call it that, can be really affordable if you're working with the right company that's experienced and equipped and efficient with their processes. And so that last point is the perfect segue to turn it over to my friend Richard, introduce him. Richard Matthews, he's the founder and CEO of Push Button Podcast and several other businesses. He's going to discuss why he created this unique and comprehensive, I would say highly affordable podcasting service. And it provides both full-scale technical and creative execution. And he's going to show you a little bit of a demo of the system and make an offer to you if you wanted to get engaged or see if it would be a good fit. So without further ado, Richard, thanks for being patient and waiting for me to get through all that. We would love to hear from you and see what you got. Here you go, Richard.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, and it's fascinating. I want to hit a few points on the things that you talked about, and then we can discuss them a little bit. The last point you just mentioned about it being prohibitively expensive from a cost or resource standpoint. And I just wanted to give you, because we run our Push Button podcast. We've done it for several years for a lot of shows. I can actually tell you exactly how much it costs to produce an episode, in times of cost for money and hours involved. And because we've done several hundred, if not more than 1,000 episodes for ourselves and for clients at this point. And we've tracked all of it through our very strict systems. On average, a 45-minute piece of content, which is, a long form piece of content, takes on average 8 to 15 hours worth of execution after you hit the stop record button. So if you put that into terms of what it costs to hire an employee or a couple of employees, because you have several different skill sets you have to touch, because you have written skill sets and you have graphic design skill sets and you have multimedia editing skill sets, you may not be able to find all those in one person. So you're looking at 2 or 3 different people that you're hiring. The cost to do that, if you're doing it just for your own show, can be upwards of $3,500, $4,500 or more. Especially if you're hiring them in-house and have to worry about taxes and other things that go into that.
You're saying that's per show? That's not per month. If you do one show a week, you're saying that's a cost per show times 4.
Yeah, it can be expensive.
Wow, yeah.
So I was going for per show, it's probably a little less than that. So if you hire someone and train them, you can have them do other things. All that cost is spread out over other things you have them doing in your business. So it's less than that, but it can be expensive, right? Or if you're doing it yourself, the reason Push Button Podcast was born in my company is because I have a show called The Hero Show. We're up at we're going to have our 200th episode anniversary here shortly. I don't know if that's what you call it, a 200th episode. I don't know, 200th. I don't know what you call that. But anyways, we're going to have our 200th episode. And I remember when I did those first, I recorded 8 episodes and then tried to do all of the work personally for to get them published and everything. And I made it through the first 3 of them before I was like, if I do this full time, I'll starve because my business will die, because it would take my entire day's work to get that work done for every episode. And so Push Button Podcast was born to solve my own problem there. And when I started showing my mastermind buddies and other people in business what we were up to, they were like, we need that. And so Push Button Podcast was born. But yeah, there's so much that goes into building that. And it can be very helpful for your business. And I want to touch on a few of the other things that you talked about. So one of them, you mentioned the growth of podcasts and like what's changed over the last few years. So if you go back to 2016, 2017 for our last, the last big political events that happened, podcasting was not yet bigger than radio. Right? It was still a smaller channel than radio. And over the last 4 or 5 years, podcasting has dramatically overtaken radio and then grown to be larger than even just audio only shows, where it's including things like your YouTube shows and your Facebook Live shows and your, we saw Periscope, which is Twitter's thing, grow really big and then die in that time and then get folded into Twitter Live. But all of those things are they're being encompassed in podcasting nowadays. And podcasting as a leveraged form of content creation gives you the ability to hit all of the biggest channels in the world for marketing, right? So when you get your show recorded and you have your show notes done and your written content done, you can get that up on a website and your blog and have it search engine optimized. So you're hitting Google and Yahoo and Bing and DuckDuckGo, which is like your largest section of people who are looking for stuff. And if you get it into the video format onto YouTube, that's the second largest search engine in the world. And if you go down into the like Apple iTunes, that's one of the third largest search places for people who are looking for content is the podcasting networks themselves. And Spotify, just like 2 months ago, overtook iTunes as the largest podcasting listener platform. And iTunes was already humongous. So there's a lot of stuff that's going into making podcasting really big. And I don't know if you've heard any of those things before, but yeah, it's definitely growing really, really rapidly.
Yeah, I personally have been using Spotify just for music and different things, and so I've been looking for different platforms, and I was really elated to see that they're really coming a long way. So yeah, I mean, the search volume that you get when you incorporate the podcast platforms plus all the other stuff is just enormous.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I wanted to touch on was the purpose of podcasting, right? So what I'm going to do real quick is see if it'll let me share my screen here. And I'm going to pull up the Push Button Podcast website. Let me know when it pops up and you can see it.
Yep, looks good.
Awesome. So the podcast, as what we talk about them with Push Button Podcasts as a podcast powered content machine, right? And you mentioned this with the hub and spoke sort of analogy. And the hub and spoke analogy is really great because one of the things we've noticed in talking to clients all the time is there's two types of podcasters, if we're going to call them that. The first type of podcasters, like the ones that you've mentioned before, that are looking to build media companies. These are your Joe Rogans or your Daily Wires or your Steven Crowders or the Young Turks or some of those things where they're using multimedia podcasting as a way to build a media company. Right. And what they're looking to do is build an audience of people who are watching them for their entertainment or value of some sort, and then to pay for that with advertising dollars. Right. And that's type number one. And a lot of people think that when we're talking about podcasts, that's what we're talking about building. And it's not. Right. And you mentioned this in the myth section. But what we're looking at is we're looking at the small businesses. How can small businesses in all the different forms and fashions use podcasting as a way to do prospecting in their business? So we talk about it as a podcast powered content machine that allows you to connect with your audience, right? And I know you mentioned these in when you were talking, but we talk about attention, awareness, and authority are the three things that you can build with your podcast. So the first one is awareness. Awareness allows you to show up in the marketplace, because if they don't know you're there, then you don't exist until you show up. And so podcasting allows you to show up everywhere when you do it the way we're talking about here. And when you have good content, that's where you get the attention. And when you deliver on the promise of your content, that's where you build the authority, and you build that reciprocity in the market. And just a brief case study for you. I had a client of mine a number of years ago. He was in the real estate investing space, and he had several different marketing channels, one of which was his podcasting channel. But he also had like an email list, a few other things. His email list and the rest of his following was about 45,000 people. And then he had his podcast, just the audio podcast, had 1,000 people that listened to it. When we started making offers to his podcast list after we built it, his podcast list would close at 25 times the volume of any of his other platforms. Because there is just a level of intimacy that's created when someone is listening to you on a regular basis, especially with long form content that you don't get anywhere else. And so you could say 45,000 people versus 1,000 people, and he would close 25 times more from his smaller list. So it's a very potent method of doing things. And just to transition into what we actually do at Push Button Podcasts is we want to make that entire podcasting world be something that's push button simple for our clients. And what we mean by that, by push button simple, is literally the only thing we want you to have to worry about as the podcaster, as the expert or the brand authority in your space, is to hit that stop record button. And that's it, right? So start and stop record. Those are the two buttons you push. And then we do everything else. So I'm going to pull up this next page I have over here, which is just the how it works page on like what we actually do. And essentially it's really simple. You just record. That's it, right? You record once a week, or you batch record once a month, right? And most of our clients actually choose to batch record once a month because they can choose 1 or 2 days at the beginning of the month and record 4 or 5 pieces of content. And then they just get all of that over to our team and we handle everything else, right? So we do a whole bunch of things: transcriptions, audio editing, video editing, commercial editions, repurposing, show notes, titles, subtitles, social media graphics, broadcast graphics. We do all the publishing. We do all the social media announcements. We do quality reviews internally and then with your team as well, if you'd like. There's a lot more that goes into it than just those things, but those are the big ones that people are already looking for and wanting to do. But we also try to make sure that every single episode has calls to action, right? We talk about soft calls to action and hard calls to action, how you actually use podcasting to drive leads in your business, and make sure that everything that's happening is all sort of happening in a way that drives people further into your business. And if you do want to check this out, it's up on the website under the How It Works page. But yeah, the only step that you're responsible for is just showing up with your message, right? We talk about this is your message, your passion, your legacy. And you mentioned earlier, Dan, about sharing your legacy. It's one of the things I'm super excited about. My son is 12 now, and about, I'd say 6 months ago, he realized that I had a YouTube show, right, which is my podcast called The Hero Show, and he was like, "Dad, you're famous," which I thought was funny. But at the same time, because of the content that I'm putting out, he's actually listening to that show himself, and then a few of his friends he's got listening to it. They're all young kids that are interested in entrepreneurship, and our podcast is about entrepreneurship. He's learning stuff. So for me, it is actually part of my legacy, which is cool, right? I'm doing it to build the prospecting and stuff in my business, but it's actually also something that I'm going to be able to share with my kids and other things. So it's very cool to be able to do that. So again, that's the first part. And the other thing that I just want to cover is that there's a lot that goes into that first part of you being able to record. And we want to make sure that we help with every part of that. So we have different pieces of the work that we do. We actually have a content planner, which I can show you if you want to see that, Dan, that actually walks people through how to create a year's worth of content in about an hour.
Definitely.
And then move it into a content outliner that actually teaches them how to take a topic and create a recording outline so that they can sit down and record anytime they want. And we also have a mini studio setup guide, so you can get a little miniature studio like this set up that literally is just a camera, a microphone, 2 lights, and a backdrop, and you can look fairly decent. And this entire setup fits in a tiny little bag that I slide into my drawer, right? So you can have a miniature studio that's easy to set up and easy to work with, so you can look and sound good. Because those are the sort of the barriers to entry for people who are like, oh, I'd like to do podcasting, but how do I know I'm going to look and sound good? It doesn't actually have to be hard if you know what to do. And I don't know what to say, right? So we'll help you build your content topics for the year. And then we'll also help you outline every single piece of content. So you're never staring at a blank screen. You can always just sit down with your studio, with your recording outline, and know exactly what to say to help drive those leads and sales in your business. And if you're doing the interview stuff, we can actually help you plan out like interview questions for your show as well. So that is really what Push Button Podcast does. It's, again, you hit the start and stop record button. That's it. We'll handle everything else for you. So where do you want me to go next? You want me to show them what like the inbox would look like, or maybe the content planner? Where should we go from here?
Yeah, I would say that, and then also just maybe some examples of where the content goes from there, and what you guys do in terms of, the social media platforms. And you were mentioning, like a different piece of content going out every day throughout the week, just so they can see like, where is it going, what are you doing, what are they doing, what are you able to do, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so let me just slide down on this page a little bit and I'll show you. So the things we do, right? We're going to do all sorts of stuff. So starting with uploading and managing files, that's one of those things that until you've started recording a bunch of content that you're like, oh, now I have to figure out what to do with all this stuff. And sometimes it could be gigabytes and gigabytes of files. We handle all of that for you, including backups and everything. So it's all named and taken care of and organized for you if you ever need to get to it, or you need your content team that you have in-house to do other things with it. We have all that stuff for you. We handle all the editing of the podcast. So audio levels, trimming, fit and finish. We make you look and sound like a professional, even if you don't feel like you look and sound like a professional yourself. We have real human creators on every step of this process. One of the things we've talked about before is what we do is we do content with context. And if you look at other service providers that are using AI to do repurposed content, a lot of that is content that computers are just not good at doing yet. They might in the future, but right now, I would say there's a pretty hard line in the sand that we use computers to do things that are automatable processes, and we use humans to do things that require creativity. So every step of this process is handled by humans who are skilled in their department. Including our transcriptions. Transcriptions are done by human transcriptionists we have on our team for 100% accuracy. The transcriptions are great for a number of reasons. One, they're super expensive to have done yourself. We actually get them done in-house because we have full-time staff members that do this. You can use those to create blog posts because we return them to you. You can use them to create books. And I know you mentioned the books already, but you can take several transcriptions of your podcast, put them together and get them to a book editor. There's people who specialize in this. You can just hand them a stack of transcriptions and you have a book on the other side. And then we go on, we create all the written assets, right? So we create written assets for everything. So every single social media channel that comes out, the descriptions on your podcast, the descriptions on YouTube, the descriptions on every social media, we create them all at once by a writer who is looking at your content and pulling out the right context for whatever it is you're talking about that time. So everything fits together as one sort of cohesive whole and one message for your business. Then we have our graphic design team creates the graphic assets for everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything, right? So we create the podcast covers for Apple iTunes, we create the Facebook images, we create the Pinterest images, the YouTube thumbnails. And we do that specific for every single network so that it looks and feels like it's part of that network, like it was customized for that. And again, it's not done by a robot, it's done by a human being who actually knows what's supposed to go on those things. And then we have internal quality reviews with our teams, but we also build our quality review process so that you as a client can be a part of that and do things like give us feedback on the headlines that we select, or give us feedback on how you like to talk about your clients, right? Maybe you don't have clients, maybe you have patients, and we need to learn those terminologies. Because we build our quality review feedback with our clients in mind, they can give us feedback. And because we're not doing robots, we're doing human beings, they learn the way that you like to talk about your clients and your business, and the way that you like to speak about what it is that you do. And then we handle all the publishing, right? So we do the publishing for the podcast. So we publish to YouTube, we publish to iTunes, we publish to your website. Those are the three major publishing channels that we use. And then we do get into what I call derivative content. If you're ever in the financial market, derivative is something that is a piece of something else. It's a lot of times termed repurposing, but I think repurposing misses a lot of the context. So we call it derivative content. And because it has to stand and be valuable on its own. So we do announcements of the original content, and we do the short derivatives of like images and short videos that go out onto the different platforms, right? So short videos are going to go to places like TikTok and Instagram, and short images are going to go to places like Instagram and Facebook groups and Facebook pages and whatnot. And they'll all link back to the original content, which has benefits for social media, has benefits for SEO, and has benefits for helping grow sort of that organic reach. And then if you're doing interviews, we actually do all the guest communication for you. So when they get launched and their episode goes live, we'll reach out to your guests on your behalf with links to everything and all the assets that they might need in order to promote. So you can get sort of that, the halo effect of them promoting your content. We handle all that for you. So literally all you have to do is just, again, show up, hit that record button, hit that stop record button, and we do everything else. So that sort of cover the gamut there of what it is we actually do for content, Dan.
Yes, absolutely. No, and I love those 11 steps. I think it's so comprehensive, and it's good for people to kind of understand that while, there are many steps and many moving pieces, which oftentimes are the reason why somebody doesn't go forward with it. At least you kind of know, hey, if I'm going to be investing some resources into having somebody else do it, um, they're getting a lot of different things done. They're paying attention to details. They're making me look like a professional. They're not going to have the transcriptions be all off and in weird words. And even some of these big names people that you see, sometimes they have people that are skipping those steps, and you see these transcriptions are off. And so this is a way to really put your best foot forward. The guest communication thing you just mentioned is awesome too, because that's how you get sort of this virality effect of other people sharing your content. Because otherwise, how would you get somebody to just share something of yours if it wasn't truly valuable, if it was hard for them to do? So not only this makes it easy for them to do, but why wouldn't they want to share and say, hey, I was just featured on this podcast? And if you and a lot of people, I've been on podcasts, and I know people that have been on podcasts, and you probably have, and it's like they don't get the episode to them in a timely manner, and they say, oh, I might get it to you in 4 to 6 weeks, and it's like, well, by then they kind of forgot about it. So, and maybe they never even send it. So that's super important.
Yeah.
And do you want to add something? I have a couple of questions to kind of
Go ahead for the
contribute.
questions.
Well, so I think what some people might be thinking too here is that, okay, this is great, you have this service, but and maybe whoever this person is that's hearing this is thinking, I'm not going to do all this stuff myself, whether I'm technical or not. But you know what? Yeah, I can kind of take these types of processes and have somebody in house do it. Have some VAs, have some technical people, but talk to, like, I mean, if you don't really, if you just know how to manage people, that's one thing. But if you don't know what to tell them to do and how to really manage a podcast production process, just being able to say, I want to keep this in house and hire these relatively low labor cost technicians to do the work, it's going to cost this person tons of money and frustration, right? I mean, so let's talk about the benefits of like trying to pull this off in house with some technical people versus outsourcing it to somebody who only does this.
Yeah. So first couple of things I can tell you, because I built it. Right. We built this ourselves in house for our company, and then turned it into a business as a second step, and now it's actually our entire focus. But the technical know-how that goes into every step, like I mentioned this, and again, if you're the kind of person that wants to bring this in house, like, more power to you. It is one of those things that I would be happier if you were doing it in house than if you weren't doing it at all, because again, just my mission in life is to help businesses grow, right? Because I think our world runs on entrepreneurship, and for some businesses it does make more sense that way. And actually, I mentioned this to a few of our clients. If you want to go down the media company route, you should absolutely bring it in house, and should hire the staff and train them how to do these things, and bring someone in to help with that. And it's one of those things that we actually offer consulting on how to build those systems if you wanted them. But the more important part is, if you are in a business whose goal is not multimedia, then your business should focus on the thing that it's the best at, right? It should focus on its expertise, right? On your expertise in that space. And because this is such a time-consuming thing to do for your business, you're either going to hire someone like us that does this full-time, or you're going to bring on full-time staff. You're going to need at least 3, if not 4 different types of people, right? You need a writer who is skilled. Those can be expensive if you're getting them. You need someone who can do transcription or transcription work. And then you need to have a multimedia expert who knows how to handle the multimedia, and not just audio, but also video, right? Because those are 2 different skill sets. A lot of times you can get them in the same person. Sometimes you can't, because there's a lot of things you have to learn about how to actually get levels right in audio that doesn't have anything to do with the visual communication of video. And so you have to have those people, and then you need to have someone who knows how to do what I call data management. And this is your systems and your processes and moving things back and forth from one place to the other. And you see this a little bit in our actual what we do, doing things like learning how to what I call silo your processes, right? A way a lot of people approach doing things like, hey, I've got my podcast done, I need to upload it to YouTube, is they'll go to YouTube and they click the little upload video to YouTube button, and they go and they upload their video, and then they go, oh, I need to write a title. And then they go back to their drawing board and write a title or 2 or 3 and put them out there and figure out which one they want. And they get back to the YouTube screen. They're like, oh, I also have to have a description. So they write the description. They're like, and then they go, oh, I need to probably have a call to action that's a link on the description. They have to go find that link and put it in there. And they're like, oh, I didn't do tag research, so I need to do tag research. And then YouTube asks you for a thumbnail, and they're like, I have to go back and get my graphic designer to create a thumbnail for them. And that one step of uploading to YouTube ends up taking several hours of work. Where if you siloed your processes and say, hey, at one point, I'm going to take the transcription we got here and create all of the written assets that we're going to need for everything going forward, which is every social media platform we're going to touch, every single piece of derivative content that's going to be written, everything that's going to happen with this podcast episode is going to be created at one time by one writer who knows the message, right? And then moves on to the graphic designer who's going to create every single graphic that's going to happen through the whole thing. So when you get to the step of, I'm going to upload a YouTube video, you have everything ready to go. You can just, put the title in, put the tags in, put the description in, put the thumbnail in, upload the video all in one go. And when you do it like that, then you can actually bring in automations and robots to do things that they're really good at, like copying and pasting data. So my encouragement is, if you're going to do it in-house, it took us 18 months to go from not having these processes in place to having them well enough in place that we were willing to actually bring them to market and charge other people service fees to do that for them. So it is a long and difficult thing to build. And again, if it's a huge part of your business, it's probably worth doing it. But for those of you who have other things to do in your business, you have other priorities, like actually serving your clients, it makes sense to hire someone like us who've already put all that work together.
Yeah, and one thing I think, one role that you didn't necessarily mention that I want to point out, I think is possibly the most important, would be essentially the project manager. Because if you don't have you are the project manager basically. So if you're the individual professional, or you're a marketing manager or a chief marketing officer, you have to be the project manager. Well, that's like a lot of hours, a lot of back and forth. What's your time worth? And if you were going to hire a project manager internally, that person is, themselves, you're going to have to pay them a couple $1,000s a month, depending on how much content you're putting out, but at least, probably $1,500 a month, even if it's just one show a week, but maybe more, not to mention all the other technical work. So, keep that in mind. And especially if you're, even if you're a marketing manager for a bigger corporation, or you're a chief marketing officer of a smaller business, there's so many different things that you have to do. And so you may think, okay, we need to have content. We should do podcasting, and I'll manage this whole process. I mean, there's just some things that you just outsource, and a lot of times even bigger companies will outsource things like digital advertising or call center things. This is one of those things that really should be that way. And I think if you really kind of reverse engineer this, and you think, if you're in business and you do marketing and sales, and you want to go beyond just the, hey, we operate on referrals and word of mouth, and that's not enough. You want to go beyond that, because if you can thrive and you can make all the money that you want, or run your nonprofit, whatever it might be, your chiropractic clinic, and it's all word of mouth and all referrals, and you don't ever need to do marketing, then this isn't for you. But if this is assuming you want to kind of go beyond that, or there's other reasons you may want to do that. So you have to do content marketing. There's no way around it. And if you're going to do content marketing, then podcasting is the most bang for the buck. Like you said, it's the most leveraged thing that you would be missing out if you didn't do that. And another thing I didn't mention earlier is that I like to look at it like it's a compound strategy. If people that understand exercise, routines and different exercises, you understand compound exercises are those that you do and it works out multiple muscle groups at once. So like a bench press or a squat or a deadlift, you are getting more bang for the buck because you're getting more muscle groups at once than doing isolated things like curls, which have their purpose. But if you have a limited amount of time and you just want to get the most bang for the buck, this is the compound content strategy. And if you're going to do it, then you better do it consistent, because gosh, one thing we could spend a lot of time talking about, we don't have to, is this graveyard of podcasts that started and stopped and never continued because they got to 3 episodes or 6 or 10, and then they were done because they didn't have the bandwidth. But when you literally have to just show up and record, like it says right there on the screen, and then literally, everything's getting taken care of. Even if you have to rely on your own team to do these moving parts and you're part of the equation, it's going to break down. But if you hire and outsource it, just like a lot of different things, and that's what you're paying them to do, then there's no question. It's going to be consistently done. You show up and record, no big deal.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons my show hit 200 episodes, is because I have, for 200 episodes, I have not touched my podcast. I have shown up to my guest recordings, recorded them, hit stop record. That's it. I've done that 200 times. and it has gone out everywhere all the time. And it's gotten to the point now where I have so much interest in guests that I have to turn people away. And I've had things like, I've got people, tech startups in Silicon Valley and $500 million a year jewelry businesses that have, come onto our show. And like one of the guys, he was a billionaire before he was 18. Come on, and we get to hear their stories and do those things, like
Wow.
crazy kind of prospecting and connections that you'd never be able to build without something like a podcast. So that's super cool. And yeah, you mentioned the project manager. Every single one of our clients gets we call them a customer concierge on our team that is dedicated to you and your show and to be your voice in our company. So they are on your side, not that we're ever at odds, but just that that person is your point of contact. You don't have to talk to our graphic designers or our multimedia people or a transcriptionist or any of those. You just have one point of contact who's always looking out for you and making sure that your content's getting done, your content's getting out the way that you want, and is interfacing with our team. So we have those customer concierges that are built in. And I think before we get too far, I want to do just a brief show of like, we have a dashboard that everyone gets access to, since we're talking about what you get, right? You get a customer concierge, you also get a dashboard. This is what my dashboard looks like as a staff member. It's pretty simple, but it just has like an inbox of things that need to get done. And if you're a client, I'll go ahead and pull up one of my customers that just got started with us, and which, plug for her. If you see her podcast coming out shortly, $1 Million Equation, she helps companies go from 6 figures to 7 figures, worthwhile content. But customer dashboard looks like this, right? When you get started, you'll have pending pieces of content. So every time you submit a piece of content to us, it'll click up the number here and you can see, oh, I've got 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of content that we've already submitted to them. Queued for publishing means we've finished it. It's ready to publish. It's waiting for its publish date. And then published is the number of pieces of content that are already published for your show. And then you'll have your own inbox with all of your pending tasks. We don't have a lot of tasks coming here. Mostly it is just for you as a customer. It is the quality review and the feedback sections where it's like, hey, we wrote 4 different headlines for your piece of content. Can you tell us which one you like the best, or maybe provide your own if you don't like any of ours, which helps sort of train our writers on the way that you want to talk about your content. So those kind of things when we need to go back and forth. And then there's a content calendar. This one's blank because it's a brand new show, but as they come in, let's say you were publishing on Monday, you would see the main podcast getting published here on YouTube and on iTunes and whatnot. And then every other day of the week, you would see the derivative content that's getting published, right? So you'd see the quotables or the short video graphics, and those would all be linking back to the content that was published on Monday. So every day of the week, you're showing up to your target market, right? So you're always there, right? It's you everywhere all the time. So you look extremely alive for what is essentially one time to sit down and record once a week. You can be everywhere, right? So that's the inbox. And then let me back out of this real quick and reset that to default and show you. We have our content planner as well. And our content planner is something that we actually sit down, your customer concierge and yourself, or even right now, it might even be myself who's doing this with you. But we take one of your areas of expertise. I know, Dan, for instance, your area of expertise, because we were doing this when I was showing you, is marketing optimization. And we get in and we help you build 10 topics around marketing expertise. And the 10 topics break out like this, right? So you have your 10 commandments of marketing expertise, right? We're actually working on our 10 commandments of podcasting right now for our content marketing for push button podcasts. But those are the most important rules about whatever it is you're talking about. And you have your frequently asked questions. These are the things that your customers are already asking about your topic because they're thinking about it and they have questions, right? For podcasting, it's things like, what kind of microphone should I use? And things like that. Simple things that people are already looking for in your space. And then my favorite of these is your should ask questions. These are the ones that you wish your audience knew to ask, if only they knew what you knew about your area of expertise, right? For instance, we covered one of the should ask questions for podcasting earlier in the siloing of your assets, right? People don't know they should do that. So one of the should ask questions is, why should you silo your content creation, right? Why should you silo the asset creation on the back end, right? And the reason is because it helps you be more efficient. And it's those kind of things that unless you're in the trenches doing what you do, your customers aren't going to know to ask those questions. But when you answer them, you present those questions and answer them, it creates that authority we were talking about at the beginning. And then the limiting and empowering beliefs are really what help you to take your client over the next hump and get the success that you're you promise, right? So limiting beliefs are things that hold them back from success, and empowering beliefs that are, if they had them, and help them achieve success. And what we do is you go through, and when you actually fill those out, they turn into a little green check mark, and they move into your content library. And the content library becomes a place that you can come back to on a regular basis and pull a topic, and then just grab a recording outline, or build a recording outline if you haven't done them yet. So each one of these topics, which it'll take you a second to load, you'll see I've got all of ours. We've got our recording outlines that are, they say edit recording outline if I've already done them, or create recording outline if I haven't, right? So like, what microphones should I use is one of our frequently asked questions. Like I mentioned that a minute ago. We click recording outline, and it'll actually pull up. This is actually a very powerful but very simple recording outline, that is based on a reverse engineering of pretty much every single successful podcast and YouTube show that has been on the market. And you've seen these things before. You have the hook, which is, hey, today we're going to talk about what microphone you should use in podcasting. And you have the welcome. Welcome is like, hey, this is the Push Button Podcast Show where we talk about all things podcasting. And you have your reintroduction. You come back to like, okay, today we're talking about microphones. Here's why microphones are important. You can put in your bullet points for your outline. Here's how you can set up and select your microphone. And you have a place where you can put in your bullet points for the how. And then most importantly, at the end of your show, you have your 2 types of call to action. We can talk about what those are later if you're interested, but your hard call to action, your soft call to action, those are on platform actions and off platform actions for those who are curious. But this little outline, once you've filled it all out, you click send to content library. It goes back to that content library. And you can, if you do several of these, you can just have several recording outlines that you can just grab the PDF, print it off, and be ready to go when you sit down in your studio. So you're never wondering what to say or how to say it. So all of that sort of is built into our brand dashboard, and you get access to all of those as a Push Button Podcast client.
Fantastic. I think by now, anybody who's been with us throughout this presentation and demo, you kind of know whether in the beginning you thought, hey, I've always wanted to do a podcast, I just haven't had the resources or the motivation to do it. And maybe there's some basic questions answered. So I think by now most people are going to understand, like, okay, yeah, this is what I want to do. Maybe there's just some specific questions in terms of, what exactly would I do with the content, and when can I get this going, and how long does this take? I would say, kind of just for the sake of time, from a next step standpoint, a discovery call, you can book through a link that'll be on this page. And the call will either be with Richard or me or both of us or whoever's available at the time based on different things. I'm referring everybody I know that could benefit from this to you, as you know, which is why I'm doing this. I'm really excited about this. In terms of pricing, one of the things that I want to just mention is that that could change from time to time. So that's something that, Richard will be able to talk about, or anybody on the team when you talk. But I will just say that he's probably charging too little for what this is. And so that might go up over time. So that's why it doesn't make sense to quote a specific rate. But I will tell you that given other options that I've been familiar with as a person in the marketing world that's done marketing consulting and chief marketing officer work and running my own businesses, the rates are, it's not a prohibitive thing. You're probably going to hear it if you know anything about it and go, oh my gosh, I was expecting to be paying more for that. So I wouldn't really worry about that at all. But if you're interested in this, definitely book a call and talk through, because depending on your vertical, your niche, we gave some examples, but I mean, if you're a chiropractor, there's some really awesome ideas that we come up with for you. If you're a realtor, if you run a nonprofit, if you run a ministry or a church, there's so many different options that this could apply to: business brokers, business consultants, whatever, right? And so these are the things that we can go through. And so I think that's probably the best bet. And then if you want to go over specific questions you might have and timeframes, but again, getting started takes maybe a couple of weeks to get everything in order. It's nothing out of the ordinary, and you can be up and running pretty fast. So like I said, I got really excited when we had met, Richard, and talking about this and what you're doing, because I've had starts and stops with my own podcast over the years. So I kind of understand that, and that there's a lot more to it than you kind of think. It's kind of like when somebody goes, well, I'm going to go sell my home on my own. I'm going to sell my home for sale by owner. It's like, well, until you actually go through the process and you realize there's a reason real estate agents exist and will continue to exist, because it's more than just what you think. And it's like, well, once you start, save yourself the frustration. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So just for the pricing standpoint, one of my my mentors, my business mastermind, was like, you need to stop charging that price and double your prices as soon as possible. And I told him I will eventually. But again, because we're taking on our first major sets of clients here as we're going forward, and we are offering a really good deal right now for the first couple of clients, because to be perfectly transparent, I'm looking to build case studies. So if you, depending on how early you're listening to this in our growth trajectory, if you're one of the first, 10 to 20 shows that we're bringing on, we're offering really good pricing deals because we want to get case studies from clients in different industries to help us grow. So the pricing will always be on the website. You can see the most up-to-date pricing there. And I have 3 of my last clients that we have signed in push button podcasts, when they find out what the pricing was, told me to shut up and take their money. So before that goes away, I would definitely make sure you take action on that. And the only other thing that I want to leave people with is you should absolutely be in the content game sooner rather than later, because it is not a short-term play, right? It is a long-term play for your business. And if you're one of the things that I have, again, one of my mentors said to me was that if it's worth doing, it's worth dedicating your next 10 years of your life to. And if you were in the content game 10 years ago, today, everyone would know your name, right? And because you know those names, you know the ones who started 10 years ago. Everyone does. Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, Steven Crowder, they're all big household names at this point because they've been doing the content marketing game for a long time. And in your business, in your space, and you can pick almost every industry, you can find someone who has that type of name because they've been doing content marketing for a long time. And so my recommendation is, whether or not you use push button podcasts or go with another provider or just do it in-house or whatever, find a way to get your business to be playing this game, because this game has dividends that pay off really big over the long term. And that's all I'll leave you with.
Yeah, and I just want to also add to that real quick, because you mentioned the long-term thing, and I want to make sure that people remember what I said, is that it's both long-term and short-term. The content play, building the authority, that does take time. But imagine you go, oh, I'm launching my show, Richard and his team got everything up and running, and I'm going to start going out and inviting guests to be on the show. And the first guest that you invite is somebody who could be a referral partner for you. Maybe, again, let's go on the chiropractor, and we're going to interview other complementary health professionals, maybe personal trainers or whatever. You get, they say, okay, great, let's have a conversation to be on the show. That could be a couple days later. The content hasn't even been recorded yet. You build a rapport with them. You record the show with them before it even gets totally published and edited, let alone before you have 100 episodes. That person loves you because you made a new friend, and you got them in a conversation that you wouldn't otherwise have been able to get just by saying, hey, can we be referral partners? You should be on my show. And you have the positioning. That person might start referring you patients or clients next week. So that's the short-term element of it. The long-term is what he was saying. In conjunction, it's both. That's why it's the most powerful marketing engine out there.
That's absolutely true. And I should have mentioned the same thing, but our show is the same way. When I started doing that, by the time I was 10 episodes in, I had partnerships with people that are driving revenue in my business that, that is not, what do you call it? It's not podcast like specific revenue, right? Like someone listened to my podcast and became a client. I had a guest on my podcast because of the networking that goes on there. I've created referral partners, or I've created opportunities, or I've brought people in and have grown my business significantly. Actually, it's 5 times larger now than it was when I started my podcast 2 years ago.
Gotcha.
And my audience on my podcast would not warrant that large of a business growth. But because of the networking, the things that you were just talking about, that's happened.
And if all that wasn't exciting enough, one thing I just have to throw out there, because I think this is a really awesome part of the offer that you have, is that regardless of what the pricing is, when somebody engages with you or us in a call here, you're offering this referral program. And I don't think that any other podcast production agencies are doing this, at least not formally, of 20% recurring. So if you're a business person or whoever, you surely know other people that could be good people that have podcasts. So if you refer 5 people that become clients, then your service is free. And so all this work is done for you at no extra cost. So regardless of what the price actually is, 20% means refer 5 and it's free. So you can't beat that as well. So that's a nice, great
so lifetime commissions, 20%. And we'll actually create professional promotional materials if your audience might be ideal audience for push button podcasts. If not, then that doesn't make sense. But again, it only takes 5. And then your service is paid for, so which is super cool. And that's really how we want to grow our business, is we want to grow it referral wise, because we want the people who come in to be like, yep, this is exactly what I need, and it's going to grow our business and be really helpful. And help us with our mission, which is to get your message out.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure everybody that's made it this far is super excited and ready to talk to the team about getting something going and what the specifics look like. So again, there'll be a link. There'll be something on the page where this is hosted that you'll be able to book a call, a discovery call, a consultation call, whatever you want to call it, and then move forward from there and get all the information you need to move to get started. So thank you very much for your time, Richard, and doing this with me and getting the word out. And I look forward to hearing about all the success stories that come through from this. And for now, this has been Dan Kalis and Richard Matthews.